I didn't believe in ghosts. At least that's what I thought before everything went downhill. My friends and I were your typical group of thrill seekers, always looking for something that would get our adrenaline rushing. The kind of group that would wander through abandoned houses, try to find the creepiest haunted locations, and mess with stuff we had no business messing with. I'd heard about this one ritual, the Midnight Circle, from an old friend who swore he saw it on some obscure online forum. He told us it was a game you play at exactly midnight to summon something. Or someone. It seemed ridiculous, but that's what made it so tempting. The instructions seemed harmless at first. All we had to do was sit in a circle, light candles in front of us, and chant a few lines. The chant was simple enough, something like "Spirit, come to me, free your soul," and let me see, we had to do this for 3 nights in a row, and after the 3rd night, we'd supposedly summon a spirit that would answer one question. It all seemed harmless enough, just a weird, quirky little ritual with no real consequences. After all, it was just a story passed down from some old website, right? Well, I was wrong. So wrong. The first night we gathered at one of our friends' houses, an old place at the edge of town. We set up the candles in a circle, as per the instructions. Everyone laughed as we got ready to start. We were in the basement, of course, because where else would you do something creepy? The place had an old furnace in the corner, and the walls were covered in damp spots from years of neglect. Not exactly the coziest spot, but it added to the atmosphere, I guess. I remember feeling kind of silly when we started chanting. I barely believed in the whole thing. As we said the last words of the chant, the lights flickered for a second, but no one thought much of it. We all went home, joking about how stupid it was, and brushed it off as just some weird experience. The second night we did it again. Same place, same setup, same chant. I won't lie, I started to feel a little on edge. Maybe it was the eeriness of the place, or the way the candle flames danced in the dark, but it felt different this time. We did the chant, and when we finished, something happened. For a second, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing just beyond the circle of light. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Everyone else seemed fine, though, and they shrugged it off when I mentioned it. But it was like something was different. It felt like we had crossed some invisible line. The 3rd night was when things went south. We met up at the house again, but this time there was a sense of tension in the air. Maybe it was because we all knew this was the final night, the night the spirit would supposedly come. I still didn't believe it, but I was starting to get nervous. It wasn't like me to back out, so I didn't want to seem like the scared one. So we went ahead with it, lighting the candles, drawing the circle, and chanting the words. I felt the air grow colder, but I told myself it was just the chill from the basement. We said the chant for what seemed like an eternity, and when we were done, everything went completely still. The lights flickered again, and I could hear a soft whisper, almost too faint to hear. My skin prickled as a strange sensation crawled over me. I glanced around the circle, and that's when I saw it. There was someone else in the room with us, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, or maybe one of my friends messing around, but when I turned to face them, there was no mistaking it. There was a figure in the corner of the room. It was too dark to make out the details, but I could see the shape tall, hunched, and unnaturally still. And then it spoke. Not in a voice I could hear, but in a way I felt deep in my chest. It whispered, "I've come to answer your question." That was when panic set in. My friends were just as frozen as I was. No one moved. No one said anything. The air felt thick, like it was pushing against me, making it hard to breathe. The candles flickered wildly, casting shadows that seemed to reach out toward the figure in the corner. Then, without warning, the figure lunged. It was so fast, it was almost like it wasn't even moving on the ground, it just seemed to glide toward us. I don't know what happened next. Everything became a blur. I I remember hearing my friend scream and the sound of something crashing to the floor, but the next thing I knew, I was outside the house, gasping for air, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I don't know how I got outside. All I remember is running, stumbling over the grass, and hearing nothing but the sound of my breath and my heart racing in my ears. My friends didn't make it out. I don't know where they are, or if they ever made it back. I've tried calling, but their phones go straight to voicemail. It's been weeks since that night, but I can still feel the presence in that house. I've never been back. I've tried to forget everything about it, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that whisper. I've come to answer your question. It's the same voice every time, just as cold and empty as it was that night. If you're reading this and think the Midnight Circle is just some harmless game, don't. I swear it's not. There are rituals meant to stay forgotten, and some spirits should never be disturbed. I've learned that the hard way, and I'm still paying for it. I don't even know where to begin with this one. Looking back, it feels like something out of a nightmare. But it wasn't. It was real. The mirror game, as we called it, was supposed to be nothing more than a stupid dare, a way to prank each other during sleepovers. If I had known what I was about to unleash, I would have never agreed to it. But when you're young and trying to impress your friends, you do dumb stuff. It all started at my best friend's house. There was a group of us, all in our teens, hanging out in her basement. The usual hangout, pizza, movies, and a lot of talk about stupid urban legends. That's when one of the guys, Chris, brought up the mirror game. He said it was a ritual you could do to summon something in the mirror. The idea was that you'd stare into a mirror in a dark room, repeat some chant 3 times, and something would appear. Chris made it sound like it was just some silly thing like Bloody Mary or something. But the more we heard about it, the more it felt wrong. The chant was simple enough. It went something like, I call upon what lies beyond the glass. Come and stand before me. Let me see your face, according to Chris. After saying it 3 times, the person would show up behind you in the mirror. He said it wouldn't hurt you, just that you'd see someone or something watching you from the reflection. I had to admit, the idea was weird, but it didn't sound dangerous. Just creepy, you know. So, there we were, gathering around in the dimly lit basement with one of those old mirrors that probably came with the house. I remember the walls were bare, and the floor creaked under our weight as we all squeezed together. We dared each other to go first, but no one was eager. We all kind of laughed it off as stupid, but I could feel the tension in the air. Chris, being the most daring of the bunch, stepped up to the mirror. He didn't even hesitate. "All right, watch this," he said, smirking. We all snickered nervously as Chris started chanting, his voice cutting through the silence. I call upon what lies beyond the glass. Come and stand before me. Let me see your face. The room went quiet for a few moments. Nothing happened. We all relaxed a bit. Maybe it was just a stupid myth after all. But then, it happened. We all saw it at the same time. At first, it was just a shift in the reflection, like the light dimmed suddenly or something. But then, in the mirror, Chris wasn't standing by himself anymore. There was something standing right behind him. It wasn't one of us. The figure was tall, too tall for anyone in the room, and it was dark, like the shadows themselves had taken shape. You could see its outline, but there was no real detail, just darkness. We froze, and then Chris started laughing, as if it was some kind of joke, but his laughter was forced, nervous. He took a step back, still facing the mirror, and that's when the figure moved. It was subtle at first, just a shift in position, like it was adjusting its stance. But then the reflection's head turned, slowly, too slowly, and it looked straight at Chris. I can't even describe the look in its eyes. There was nothing human about them. They were like black voids absorbing everything around them. Chris didn't laugh anymore. His face went pale, and I saw his hands trembling. That's when I knew something wasn't right. He started to back away from the mirror, but his reflection stayed staring. We all stood there, too scared to move. No one said a word. And then, as if the reflection could sense the fear, it smiled. The expression wasn't something that belonged in the mirror. It didn't belong in the real world either. It was twisted, like something had carved the smile into its face. The reflection didn't move, but its smile kept growing, widening and widening until it was grotesque. The kind of smile you only see in nightmares. We panicked. Chris tried to run away, but his reflection didn't. It stayed in the mirror, eyes never leaving his face. We all shouted, trying to snap him out of it, but he didn't react. It was like he couldn't hear us. Finally, we grabbed Chris and yanked him away from the mirror. It felt like an eternity, but we managed to drag him into the other room. His body felt like dead weight as we pulled him away. When we looked back, the mirror was empty. No reflection, nothing. Chris collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath. He looked like he'd seen a ghost or maybe worse. The others were freaked out, but I don't think any of us realized how bad it actually was. We tried to calm Chris down, but he kept muttering something over and over again, like he was in a trance. It's coming. It's coming back. None of us knew what to do. We thought maybe we'd just freaked ourselves out. But Chris wasn't the same after that. He stopped hanging out with us, stopped talking to anyone, and every time he saw a mirror, he would freeze up. No matter what size the mirror was, it didn't matter. He'd freeze and stare at it like he was waiting for something to appear behind him. But it didn't stop there. One night I was alone in my room trying to sleep when I heard a faint tapping sound. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but the sound got louder. I got up to check the windows, nothing. I checked the doors locked, but then I saw it. In the corner of my room was the reflection of something I didn't recognize. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was the same shadowy figure, standing just behind my bed. I didn't stick around to figure out what happened next. I grabbed my stuff and ran out of the room. I haven't gone near a mirror since that night, and I don't think I ever will again. If you're reading this, don't even think about trying the mirror game. What we summoned wasn't some harmless prank. It wasn't just a game. That thing in the mirror, whatever it was, is still out there, and if you call it, it will come. I used to think that folklore and urban legends were just that, stories made up to get a few chills down your spine or to entertain during sleepovers. But that all changed after one incident, when I stumbled into a ritual that should have stayed buried in the past. I wasn't even looking for trouble, but somehow, trouble found me. It all started with an old, creaky house my family moved into when I was a kid. We weren't rich or anything, so the house wasn't exactly fancy. It was just an old 2-story house on the outskirts of town. But the thing about it was, there was always something off about the place. Like every time I walked into a certain room, I'd feel a chill run down my spine. I can't explain it. The room wasn't any different from the rest of the house, just an unused guest room with dusty old furniture and windows covered in heavy curtains. But the energy in there was unlike anything I'd felt before. As kids do, my siblings and I dared each other to explore the house when we first moved in. One evening, my older brother Mike dared me to go into the room and sit in the dark for a few minutes. He thought it'd be hilarious to scare me, but I wasn't about to back down. So I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. The moment I did, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick, and the room seemed too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt unnatural. But I shrugged it off as me being paranoid, and I sat down on the old, worn chair by the window, waiting for the minutes to pass. But the silence felt oppressive. Then I noticed something strange. On the wall near the bed, there was a dusty, old mirror. It wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. I swear I'd never seen it before, even though the room had clearly been there for a while. It was framed in dark wood, and the glass had a faint shimmer to it. It didn't look special, but there was something about it that felt like it had a story to tell. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a low whisper. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but it came again just loud enough to hear, like a voice from behind the door. Don't look into the mirror. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest. I looked around. No one was there. My brother wasn't hiding in the corner, playing some joke. It was just me, alone in the room. The whisper came again, clearer this time. Don't open the door. Leave it shut. I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? Should I leave the room? I didn't want to make a sound, but I couldn't help myself. My eyes were drawn to the mirror. It was as if it was calling me. I turned slowly, unable to stop myself, and took a step closer to the mirror. That's when everything changed. As I looked into the glass, I saw something moving in the reflection. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I recognized. It was a shadowy figure, tall and dark, standing behind me. I whipped around, but the room was empty. No one was there. I turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, watching me. I felt a wave of cold panic rush over me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my mind was racing, but I was stuck in place. The figure in the mirror stepped closer to me, and then it whispered again. You should not have opened it. The voice wasn't a voice I recognized. It was low, almost like a growl, and the sound sent a shiver through my entire body. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew in that moment that I had done something I couldn't undo. I reached out to touch the mirror. The second my fingers made contact with the glass, I felt a sharp, cold sensation shoot up my arm. The mirror rippled, like it was made of water instead of glass. The shadowy figure reached out its hand from the reflection, its fingers stretching toward me. I yanked my hand back in terror, but the figure's hand was already there. It was as if the mirror was pulling me in. My heart was pounding, and my breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to pull away, but it was no use. The mirror's grip was too strong. It felt like the glass was alive, like it had a mind of its own. That's when I heard my brother's voice from the hallway, calling my name. Hey, are you okay in there? The mirror's grip loosened for just a second, and I took that as my chance. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I didn't look back, even though I knew the thing in the mirror was still there, watching me. For the rest of the night, I stayed far away from that room. I told Mike I was fine, but deep down, I knew something had followed me out of that room. Something I couldn't explain. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Items in my room would go missing, only to be found in odd places. The lights flickered at night, and sometimes I'd hear whispers from behind closed doors. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but then I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. I'd catch glimpses of something moving in the reflection of windows or mirrors, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. And then it got worse. One night, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. I knew I had locked it before going to bed. I was about to get up and close it when I saw something in the corner of my room, the shadowy figure. It wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was right there, standing in my room. Its eyes were pitch black, and its face was twisted in a grotesque expression. It was grinning, but it wasn't a smile. It was a twisted, hungry expression, like it was about to devour me. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to scream. I ran out of my room and woke up my parents. By the time they came to check, the figure was gone, but I knew it hadn't left. We moved out of that house soon after, but the memories still haunt me. Sometimes I still see that thing in reflections, like it's just waiting for me to look again. I've stayed away from mirrors ever since. And if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's this: never, ever mess with a room that feels wrong. There are things behind those doors, things you don't want to invite in. I never believed in curses or rituals, at least, not until I found myself in the middle of a situation that I couldn't explain. Looking back, I wish I had listened to the old warnings. It wasn't just some harmless superstition. No, this was real, and it came with a price. It all started when I moved into a new apartment. It wasn't anything special, just a standard one-bedroom in the city, perfect for someone who was just starting out. The building was old, probably built in the 60s or 70s, but it had charm. The kind of place you could see yourself living in for a while, making memories. But the moment I stepped inside my apartment, I felt a chill. I'm not talking about the temperature, there was something off about the place. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was like the walls were whispering. I shrugged it off as nerves. New places can feel strange, especially when you're alone for the first time. One of the things that caught my eye, though, was a mirror hanging on the wall in the hallway. It was big, framed with ornate gold, and looked like something you'd find in a thrift store. It didn't match the modern feel of the apartment, but for some reason I didn't think much of it. I figured I'd take it down later and replace it with something else, but I didn't get around to it. The first couple of nights weren't so bad. I was still adjusting to the apartment, and it was a bit lonely, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. Until the third night. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of something scraping. At first I thought it was the pipes old buildings can make weird noises, but then I heard it again, a faint, dragging sound, like something heavy was being moved across the floor. I froze. I wasn't sure where the sound was coming from, but it didn't seem like it was in the hallway. It felt closer, like it was... I couldn't move, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard it, a voice, soft but clear, coming from the hallway. It was too faint to understand, but it was definitely there. I kept my eyes shut, willing myself to fall back asleep, but I couldn't. I was terrified, wide awake, listening to the sound of something moving closer to my door. I didn't dare open my eyes. I just lay there, clutching the blanket, trying to calm my breathing, and then I heard something worse, footsteps. The distinct sound of footsteps moving down the hallway toward my bedroom door. I couldn't even move my legs, my body too stiff with fear. The footsteps stopped outside my door, but I didn't hear a knock. Instead, there was a sudden cold breeze that blew under the door, and that's when I felt it. A presence. I can't explain it. There was no physical touch, no obvious sign, but it felt like someone was standing there just waiting. I didn't dare move. I couldn't make a sound. It felt like hours, but eventually the cold receded, and the footsteps faded into silence. The next morning I was exhausted, but I convinced myself that it was all just a bad dream. Maybe I'd had too much to drink, maybe it was the stress of moving into a new place. I tried to brush it off, but deep down I knew something was wrong. As the days passed, things only got stranger. At night, I'd hear soft whispering voices coming from the hallway again. Sometimes I'd walk down the hall to check, but there would be nothing there. Just the mirror hanging on the wall, like it had always been. One night I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. So I sat down in front of the mirror. I know, stupid idea, but I was desperate. I had to see if there was something I was missing. I stared at my reflection for what felt like an eternity. Nothing happened, but then, just as I was about to look away, I saw something. At first it was just a flicker, something in the corner of the glass. But when I focused, I saw a figure standing behind me. It was a shadow, dark and tall, almost like it didn't belong in the reflection. My heart skipped a beat. I whirled around. The hallway was empty. I turned back to the mirror. The shadow was still there, but now it was closer, almost too close, like it was standing right behind me. The air grew colder, and I felt a pressure on my chest, like someone was breathing down my neck. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. And then it happened. The figure in the mirror reached out toward me, its hand coming through the glass, cold and eerie. I stumbled back, tripping over my feet as I rushed away from the mirror. I hit the floor hard, but I didn't care. I scrambled to get up, but the thing in the mirror wasn't done. The last thing I saw before I ran out of the apartment was the figure stepping out of the mirror. It didn't have a face, just a dark void where its eyes should have been. And as I bolted through the door and into the hall, I heard its whisper, soft and haunting. "You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have opened the door. I didn't stay there another night. I packed my things in a daze and fled, leaving behind everything. I stayed with a friend for a while until I could find another place. I never went back to that apartment, and I've never touched a mirror the same way since." It felt like a warning, something I shouldn't have ignored. If there's one thing I learned from that experience, it's that there are certain things in life, certain rituals that should never be tampered with. Some doors are better left closed, and some reflections are better left clean. And if anyone ever tells you a story about mirrors, don't just laugh it off. I did, and look where it got me.